Okay, great. So we are live. Welcome, Unify community. So today we are live with our dear friends Amoda Maa and her husband Kavi. And Amoda Maa is a spiritual teacher, author, and speaker. And Kavi has worked by her side for many years and is also a musician and a poet. So today is the first part of a two-part series on enlightened relationships, where we will dive into the heart of what it is to be in an enlightened relationship. We'll also be taking questions, so please feel free to comment in the comment section if anything arises that you'd like us to address. So we are so grateful to have you both here with us today. Please tell us everything.
Excuse me for 1 minute while I share all of this. So just carry on, Amoda, while I do all this. Okay.
Well,
thank you anyway. Sorry,
yeah,
thank you. I forgot to say thank you.
It's lovely to be here again on the Unify Network with you, Sayde, and everyone else. So we have a two-part live stream, and the theme of this one is relationship as a doorway to awakening. So relationship is always a reflection of our inner state of consciousness. What I mean by that is not the actual form of the relationship, but the way that we relate. Yeah, our experience within relationship is a reflection of our inner state of consciousness. We're always in relationship. We're always relating to someone or something, or relating to ourselves. So the whole of life is a relationship. So in that big context of life as the relationship and everything in it being a relationship, something that we relate to, that is always a reflection of our inner state of consciousness. We're either relating from a divided state. In other words, relating from a sense of separate self. In other words, relating from ignorance of our true nature. Yeah. In other words, not knowing who we really are, coming from a place of incompleteness, still seeking something outside of me to make me feel complete, which is the majority of the human state. It's the majority of the human journey. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, we're born into the world from wholeness into separation, and from that separation we seek in the world. We seek love, we seek fulfillment, we seek satisfaction, we seek success, we seek security, we seek safety. So that's just part of the human journey. At some point, as attention turns inwards, we start to seek that wholeness from an inner dimension of being, rather than from the world of form. Whilst we're on that journey, relationship is a reflection. How we relate is a reflection of that inner state of consciousness. When we're seeking fulfillment from outside of ourselves, we're looking for the dream of fulfillment from someone else, yeah, from the nature of relationship, from the form of relationship. You could call that the egoic state of consciousness. So when we enter relationship from an egoic state of consciousness, then we're seeking somebody outside of ourselves to fulfill us. So that's the dream of relationship, the myth of relationship, the myth or the dream of the perfect one who will fulfill me. We can also relate to our parents in this way. We can relate to our children in this way. We can relate to friends in this way, and we can relate to our neighbor in this way. Obviously, with people that we have more of a history with, then that dream, if you like, is stronger because we have more expectations of that fulfillment from them. And with a stranger, we usually don't have many expectations, at least initially. Yeah. So, or we can relate from a different dimension of being, which is a wholeness, an inner completeness. You could call that awakening out of the dream of separation, awakening to our true nature as wholeness. And when we relate from that space, we relate not from the need to get something, or the need to be fulfilled, or the need to be loved, or the need to be secure, or the need to have the perfect relationship or the perfect partner. But we come from a much different place, which is an inner spaciousness or an inner openness. And that changes the whole experience and the way relationship is lived from that place. Now we can deepen into that openness, and into that presence within relationship. But when it's a very intimate relationship, it can get very sticky. Yeah. So I usually, if I do talk about relationship, which is not very often actually, but when I do talk about relationship, I usually start at the point of examining the myth of relationship, examining the personal dream, and being very honest. My invitation is always, can you really be honest about the dream of the perfect one, the dream of the perfect relationship, the dream of the special relationship? Because very often it's not seen, it's not conscious. It's just sort of playing itself out as a driving force behind the scenes. But it creates all sorts of entanglements, all sorts of problems, all sorts of disappointments. You could say it's the falling in love and the falling out of love syndrome, or the falling in love and the relationship is perfect for a few weeks or a few months, or if you're lucky, a couple of years, and then it's the end of the honeymoon period. So we can start to examine that. We can start to examine what that dream of relationship is. Are we really seeking fulfillment from outside of ourselves? Because if that's the case, and we can be honest with ourselves, then we can start to look inwards for that. We can start to look, to go vertically in rather than looking outwards for someone or something to make me feel loved, to complete me, so that I can know myself as that love. But primarily, the invitation is to know yourself as that love, either in relationship or not in relationship. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. Thank you so much. It's so beautiful. And so when we're in this intense dynamic, because sometimes it can get so intense in relationship, and it all seems to be moving so quickly. Do you have recommendations or something that can be practiced even in moments of trigger, or when this story is being confronted with the reality of it not being met? I'd love to hear if there's something that you could say about, just really being triggered in these moments of relationship.
Do you want to say something, Kavi, or shall I?
Well, I kind of feel like you can give a good context to this, and then after that I'll speak to something, because there is a poem that I want to read that just kind of opens it up into a sort of another dimension of the level of beauty and poetry that I want to bring to it, because it's not a clinical how to practice, even though the biggest question that everybody wants to ask, so we're experts, which in a way we're not, we're having our unique experience, is the question is how, always how to, which is why actually we don't speak too much about this, because ultimately there's no how to, in the same way that there's no how to awaken. There's only pointing to something and using metaphor and allegory and, you know, these kind of signposts, but ultimately it's everybody's unique journey. Having said that, there are some pointers, there are, you know, there are, I guess, tips and tricks. So maybe if you go into that a little bit, Amoda, and then after that, I'll do something with it.
Yeah, like Kavi says, that well, for a start, we're not interested in fixing relationship. That's not what we do. There is no fixing a relationship. Of course, there are many therapeutic models and spiritual models even for increasing the love in relationship and so on, communication skills. And all of that is good, but ultimately you can cut right through that. What the direct path, if you like, in relationship is, or what the direct path of love is telling the truth and listening to the truth. Telling the truth and listening to the truth is the same as saying relating from openness. Relating from openness, or meeting another in openness, means not coming with a strategy of expectation or control or blame or or pleasing or bullying or seducing, all these subtle strategies that we have in order to keep love safe, in order to keep relationships safe, in order to make sure that the other will stay with us, in order to make sure that the other will love us, will approve of us, will not abandon us, will not reject us, will not hurt us. Yeah? And so there's all these clever strategies in communication and in behavior and just in the energetic interaction with another in intimacy that we're usually unconscious of, that have become habitual, but are a preventative. Yeah, they squeeze love into a small box, yeah, rather than allowing love to be free, to be open. What I mean by that is that when we're communicating, when we're meeting another, when we're just being with another, with our lover, with our partner, with our husband, with our wife, yeah, with the other intimate, if we meet them from openness and not from the narratives of our mind, not from the expectations of our mind, that's what I mean by the dream, the expectations that you are the person I thought you were when I first met you, when I fell in love with you. And now you're not. And now I'm scared. And now I'm resentful. And now I'm hurt. And now I feel rejected because you're not the one I thought you were, but I can't quite say that. And even in saying it, that's not the resolution of it. It's to tell the truth of your feelings, not dumping your feelings. Yeah, it's not an emotional outburst, although sometimes it can be, but that's not what I'm talking about. To tell the truth of your feelings from openness, from tenderness, from spaciousness, from presence. That's why this is not really a relationship with the other, it's a relationship with yourself. Yeah. That's why it's a doorway to awakening, awakening out of the dream of the egoic mind that is always operating from narratives, controlling life, expecting this to happen, wanting that to happen, rejecting that. The end of narratives, just telling the truth, which is raw, which is naked, which is tender, which is vulnerable, and then listening to the truth of the other. Because when you listen to the other telling the truth of their feelings from the same place, very often we don't want to hear it, because the truth of their feelings makes us feel rejected, makes us feel abandoned, makes us feel unloved, makes us feel unworthy, makes us feel that we've done something wrong, and so on and so on. So to tell the truth and to listen to the truth is a massive shift in the way that we relate. If we can just start from that place, then there can be raw truth, there can be trigger, in the sense that the truth goes deep and touches an old wound perhaps, but it doesn't have to become a drama. Yeah? It becomes a drama when we believe the narrative in the trigger to be true. I shouldn't be feeling this, you shouldn't have done that, it's your fault, and or it's my fault. Yeah, and then we're falling into the drama. We can be triggered and we can tell the truth from that trigger place, and it's the end. It resolves it. It doesn't resolve it in the sense of, oh well, you know, now we have some kind of bargain that we know how to relate to each other, and you won't hurt me again and I won't do that again. Or now we love each other and it's exactly as it was at the beginning of the honeymoon period, and everything's perfect. No, it's not that sort of resolution. The resolution is open. I tell the truth, I listen to the truth. That's it. No agenda, no outcome, no conclusion. It just stays in that open place. It's tender, it's raw, and then everything takes care of itself.
You see, I won't jump straight into that poem, because what Amoda said has reminded me, because even though we don't really speak personally, so there's a time for speaking personally, to support people in this difficult, arduous journey of intimate relationship, which is ultimately all relationship, but is firmly fixed in what we're talking about here, in an intimate relationship with the other, the one who mirrors everything that we are and everything that is unresolved within us, everything that we carry. We enter a relationship carrying the bags and the wounds of everything we've become on the conditioned level, everything, all of the hidden beliefs, all of the inner strategies, all of the wounded innocence, all of these games that we've learned to play in the world that serve us pretty well. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's no recrimination in that. But we enter the world with that persona, with the self. And there it is, the self. And it functions well, and it's got its job, and it's got its purpose. And then we meet the other. Then we meet the other. And that might happen one time and it just doesn't work out. It might happen another time where we meet another one and it just doesn't work out for all of the reasons that are going to become obvious over the next hour and a half. And we still carry on, because the defense of self is almost the most important thing to a conditioned human being, to an egoic human being. That's what we have, and that's why we reject the other. And we reject the other because we're looking for something that is so perfect in our imagination, consciously or unconsciously, that we reject it, or we reject ourselves when it fails to live up to those conditions. And that's why this is so powerful, and that's why we've decided just to do this, because this is the end of that. And I can bear testament, because when I met Amoda, she was much further down the line, if there is a line, of having no agenda in the relationship, in terms of she didn't need me. There was just no need there. She had had her awakening and she was married to God. She still had some stuff to resolve with her mother, but that wasn't me. So I entered this relationship, and over a period of, well, we've been together for 20 years now. I had to go through pretty much, I mean, I was pretty far down the spiritual line, and I'd done a lot of work on myself, and I'd done a lot of therapy, and I'd done a lot of processing, a lot. But still, in an intimate relationship, it digs at you. It digs at all of the parts that are still unresolved. And there it was, meeting it. And because I'm such a willing partner, and there was just a yearning in me, a natural yearning in me for a deeper openness, not with her, but with myself. And she became the mirror for me to willingly burn what needed to be burned in that fire. Now, there are two things to say to that. One is she's an awakened woman, so I've got a head start. What happens, which is another question, if your partner's not an awakened woman or an awakened man and doesn't want to know? Because I have that. I deal with clients who actually, they're on the awakening path and the conscious path and wanting to resolve things, but the other partner isn't. So, you know, that's something we can talk about a bit later. But the willingness to what I call burn, to open, to surrender the righteous self or the wrongous self, the one who just wants to hold on. And that's where the trigger is. That's where the tightness is. That's where the fear is. That's where, and that's what has to be met. That's what has to be released. And it cannot generally be released all at once. It just doesn't work like that. You have to see it. You have to see it. The path of becoming aware of one's own mechanisms is the most important path that we can take in life. Because when we get to see our habitual patterns of projection, of avoidance, of denial, of retraction, of game playing, of manipulating, all of those are strategies of the self. And the trick is to see them so clearly that you then have a decision to make, a decision from presence, a decision from awareness that sees those strategies and decides to surrender the strategy maker and the strategies. And it hurts. It's supposed to hurt because you're releasing the conditioned self. And the conditioned self doesn't want to let go because it's going to scream death.
So this thing about surrender, it's that's why relationship is a doorway to awakening, because it's not a surrender to the other. It's not a surrender to the other human form in the sense that I'll put down my will and, you know, just be your doormat. It's not that kind of surrender. It's surrender of the ego's need to be right. And that rightness is not just the obvious rightness of I'm right, you're wrong, but it's the rightness of I've been hard done by. I've been hurt. I've been abused. And of course, there is hurt and there is abuse. So I'm talking about subtle strategies here, or subtle narratives. He shouldn't have said that to me. Yeah, because when the ego feels right, either it's in its victimhood or in its controllerhood, it tightens. Yeah, there's a tightening inside. And that tightening strengthens the separate self, the self-identity, the identity of me here, and this is how I feel, and this is how I believe, and this is how I've been hard done by, and this is how it should be, and this is how it shouldn't be. Yeah, and and all those little narratives, it creates a strengthening of that self-identity, and him or her out there as the one that's done me wrong, or the one that's not good enough, or the one that has let me down. And so the separation begins. So the surrender is the surrender of the narratives. That doesn't mean that you stop feeling your feelings. Yeah, there's a feeling, a felt sense beneath the narratives. Yeah, very often the narratives are a cover up. I feel hurt, for the deeper feeling. Yeah, which can be tenderness. When we're hurt, we feel raw, we feel tender. Yeah, and so on and so on. So to surrender the narratives is to surrender the ego identity. That's an internal process. You're not surrendering to the other, you're surrendering the ego in your inner dimension. You're surrendering it to the openness within you, to the deeper dimension within you. And then from that place, you can start to really feel your true feelings without strengthening the separate self. And to be honest with that, there's a world of difference between the two. So when you start seeing that mechanism of the ego's narratives, and very often we need somebody to reflect that back to us, so it's not always that easy, but this can either be a self-reflective process, or it happens in relationship if you're in a partnership that allows that, or you do that with a teacher or with somebody outside who can support that. But somewhere along the line, that internal clear seeing of that mechanism of ego's defensiveness has to begin. And then there's the opportunity for you to awaken out of the dream of separate self within relationship, whether that relationship continues or whether it comes to an end. It actually doesn't matter. Yeah. And so yeah. So that's how powerful relationship can be. Well, it's not can be, it is. It's just not often that opportunity to walk through that doorway into openness is not often taken, because the dream of relationship, the dream of the perfect relationship is so strong that it stands in the way of the deeper possibility of relationship.
The possibility of true relationship is two silences, two innocence, two nakednesses meeting. That's what we do, is we don't carry ourselves. There is no self left to carry into each and every encounter. And it sounds, I was writing about this earlier, it sounds, enlightened relationship sounds all sort of incredible and high vibration. And it has that quality, but it's also incredibly normal. It's incredibly natural. And that is one of the things that we're here to say, is it's not pedestalized. It's actually the birthright of all of us. And in these times that we're in, of huge waves of change and evolutionary movement that's happening within the whole world, relationship itself is available for change. True relating with the partner, true relating with the world. And it comes from us being able to carry no agenda in, nakedness in, a sort of innocence, if you like, without naivety. It's not naive. There's no doormat consciousness going on here. It's just showing up in presence as though it's a living meditation all of the time, without any mat, without any stuff around it. It's showing up all the time. And it does take a willingness, and it does take, on both parties, preferably. And then if you've got two parties who are willing to go on that journey, then you can really cook on gas, because then you can start practicing meeting in that place and listening to each other. Effective communication, communication from the deepest, that starts with an I, not a you, is a fundamental to honest, clear relationship. The I am this, I feel this, I'm going through this is happening to me. This is my honest feeling about this. And you're laying yourself on the line for it, knowing that you might get a dagger. No, not literally. You might get something that comes at you, but then the willingness on the other, the partner, to also say, I hear you, and I feel this, and I feel this. And in that way, communication starts to happen. Communication that's not built on self. We'll go on and on about this, that the necessity to start opening up that pathway of honesty, the pathway of honesty, pathway of yes, vulnerability. Here we are. Men, vulnerability. For men to sit and burn in some of that vulnerability, some of the humility that happens when you surrender the righteous ego, which we all have, of course, but men have in bucket loads. They have a lot of it because it's built into the conditioning that we all go through. It's where the man is sort of handy on, but to be able to have the tenacity and willingness to surrender that righteous self is extremely powerful. You don't lose anything. Everything is gained. The kingdom of openness is gained through the ability to do these things. So yes, there are strategies to actually that we can employ consciously. But it's sticky. It's sticky terrain for people, as we can see. Dysfunctionality. We take our dysfunctionality into relationship. And there's no criticism, that's just what we do. I know, I've done it. My back catalogue of relationships is littered with dysfunctionality, of projection, of me wanting, looking for a mummy. Without even realizing I was looking for a mummy. I was looking for a mummy to hide behind, to make it all right, to do this, that, and the other. So I was carried these wounds in, little realizing. And I must tell you this, that what we do when we enter a relationship, if we're not aware and we're not conscious and we're not open, is while this sort of relationship is going on at the surface level of I love you, all the kind of stuff that we know, you're great and everything's wonderful. We're actually on a deeper subconscious level beginning to wrap tentacles, subconscious tentacles around each other. Those tentacles that we wrap around each other are our unresolved wounds and our vulnerabilities and our lost innocence and our hurts and our grievances and our righteousness. And we wrap those around each other unconsciously, subconsciously, while we seem to be having this other kind of relationship. And by the time we wake up to realizing that something is happening or not happening, those kind of games and those strategies, we've already joined forces in them. And those are subtle, covert barterings that we have with each other. If you do this, I'll do that. If you don't do this, I won't do that. If you don't go there, then I won't say that. If you hurt me, I'll be wounded and I'll become a victim, and I won't do that. Then I won't love you anymore. These endless little strategies. And in that sense, from the potential openness that we have, which has no of none of these tentacles around us, there we are. We think we're moving closer together, and we're moving further and further away into greater separation, because separation is what we know. Separation is what we know. That's what we come here, and that's what we learn. That's what happens when we incarnate into these bodies as a self. We're told who we are, told what we become, so we become a self, and then the self is there. And so these opportunities for the opening that we're offered in these intimate relationships, all relationships, are missed because the protective self goes, no, I'm not going there. I'm not doing that. That's too dangerous, or I don't want that, or it's hurt, or he's not the right one, or I made a big mistake, or all of these kind of things. And little by little, we just reaffirm the self that then pursues its egoic mission in the world. It's hilarious when you think about it from a certain standpoint. It's hilarious, and not so hilarious as well, because a lot of people suffer from it. So I'm not laughing at anybody. I know how difficult it is. But I also do know, and I keep wanting to say this, that there is a light, that burns in each of us that wants true relationship. We want to be met. We want to be met in the truth of where we are without having to change anything about ourselves. That is what we want, and that's why we're seeking relationship. We want to be seen for who we are. Wounds, warts, problems, issues, all of it. We want to be seen for who we are. And that seen is how we're held in relationship. And it seems to dissolve it. I don't mean seen as the ego head monster that we might be. I mean the truth of our broken hearts, the truth of our wounded self, the truth of our brokenness. We long to be seen in that. And if we don't get seen in that, that's a bad situation, because then something tends to wither. Some part of us withers a little bit. And that's sadness. It brings sadness to me. I feel for people who yearn for that. I don't know, there isn't anybody who doesn't want the same thing. And yet we go around with our strategied selves, unable to take that leap. The greatest gift we can give each other is to offer ourselves offer our truths to each other. That's why I was blessed in this way, by having somebody as clear as Amoda, who then held up a mirror and said, no, you can't play those games with me. She didn't say it physically. She didn't need to say it. She just held it up because that was not who she was. She's quite merciless, is Amoda. And so I was met with myself. What am I going to do? Am I going to flee this relationship like I've fled and run away from every other relationship when it got too much? Or am I going to stay and trust, or let go, or dive into the unknown, the damn unknown, the thing that we're most afraid of, the great unknown, the small unknown? And I was tenacious enough, because I loved her with everything, and I smelt there was a possibility for me in opening, in surrendering all of the defenses around my heart, all of the defensive strategies. And it took time and it took patience. I didn't even really know what I was doing. It wasn't a strategy. It wasn't a how-to. It was just a natural impulse, because I too had the natural impulse to want to be seen, to want to meet some other human being in this damn life, full of games and idiocy and superficiality and insanity, to meet another human being in the deepest. What greater blessing is there than that? Not for self, but for love,
Kavi, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
You were mentioning this sadness about not being seen in those wounded places. what would you say to someone who may be experiencing that? Could that be a layer of their own perception that they may need to lean in through? Or what does that look like for someone who's feeling unmet or unseen or unheard in relationship? And how can they be with that more?
Well, ultimately, we need to be with every aspect of ourselves, regardless of anybody else. There's no other way. Awakening is not leaving ourselves. Awakening is coming into ourselves in the sense that we're able to open the trap door of defendedness and then enter the kingdom of darkness, the darkness within, the difficult feelings, yes, the abandoned feelings, yes, all the places that were wounded. So there's a need to embrace everything that arises and then not turn it into a story, and then not turn it into the perpetuation of self. To be able to open so deeply to one's wounding or one's betrayal or one's hurt, or without turning that into a story of I'm a betrayed one or I'm a victim or any of these kind of any stories, but to keep falling into the unknown. It's not a weakness, it's an openness. Openness is not weakness, openness is strength. We understand that openness is weakness, but it's not, it's the opposite. Openness, as Amoda's talked about all the time in her teaching, openness is our great strength, because in openness, everything is allowed, because you come home to consciousness. So the guidance, if you like, the advice for people, sadness is inherent in the human condition. It's sad. It's a sad affair. Existence has duality. Sorry, Amoda. Existence has duality embedded in it. So, yes, it might be sad, but yes, it's ecstatic. Yes, it's tragic. Yes, but it's utterly exquisite. So that's, just in answer to that question, nothing is ever mono. But the ability for us to open to it, even though it hurts like hell, without seeking a resolution to it, without turning it into a game, a story, is really, so important.
But Kavi, the question would be perhaps in relationship, in intimate relationship, if someone's feeling that, is that something that they need to work on for themselves, or is that something that they would express in the relationship? Because, well, first of all, it's to acknowledge that in yourself.
Yes.
And not to make yourself wrong for that. And there's a place for just being with that in yourself. Very often it just resolves itself, or it moves in that and moves into a different space. So it doesn't become a story that I'm the one that's never heard, I'm the one that's never met. Or if the feeling is persistent, then it has to be shared in the relationship. That's where telling the truth and listening to the truth comes into the glaring spotlight. Because if you're not able to tell the truth without blaming the other, because there's a way of telling your truth of I don't feel met, a way of saying that, a way of expressing that, maybe not in those words, but those words have to be found in your most tender place, your most intimate place with yourself. But if that can be expressed and you can tell the truth without blaming the other, you didn't meet me, but to take full responsibility for your feelings and yet not to keep them tucked away as some secret, then the other must listen to the truth. Because if the other won't listen to the truth, then there's no opening in that relationship for love, real love, to grow. So it is a two-way thing.
Yes.
It is a two-way thing. Yeah. So that's how delicate it can be.
Yeah, I mean,
Like in our Yeah, go on.
Go on. No, you go on.
Well, you know, for instance, with us, there's nothing that's ever hidden. There's nothing that's ever held back. There's nothing that's a secret. And at the same time, there's no dumping on the other. There's no blame. There's no resentment. There's no you did this, you did that. You don't hear me. You don't, yeah. It's always a taking of responsibility, but none of that is secretive. Yeah. So if there's a genuine need to tell the truth of that, then there is always the space of that. And that means there's never any past that comes into the now. There's never any baggage. There's never any resentment. There's never any whatever it is that we tuck regret in, you know, or, yeah, in the background that then pollutes the clarity of love in the present, in the present, in the present. And so relationship, this relationship, enlightened relationship, which is what we're offering the possibility as, is always in the present. It doesn't carry the past with it. That there might be the past in the sense of some of your wounds have been triggered. That's part of the journey to the enlightened relationship. But in itself, it's always in the present. There's never like, oh, I felt that back there and I've been harboring it as a grievance. There's no grievances. If there are grievances in the relationship, it'll become a heavy weight that at some point will burden the relationship or restrict the relationship, and true love will not grow. And then relationship will just be a play of two roles. Yeah, two roles playing with each other. I play this role, you play that role. And we've become used to that role. I've become used to my role, and I've become used to you in your role. And most relationships operate as two roles. That is not relationship. That is not true relating. There's no true intimacy in that. There's no true love in that. Yeah. So it's important, if you like, if we want to wake up out of the dream of relationship, if we want to wake up out of the drama of relationship, and if we want to wake up out of the dream of separation, which is the self-identity as me and my story, and you as you and your story, if we want to wake out of that, we have to bring this telling the truth and listening to the truth into the lived reality of relating. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. What happened to your poem?
Right, the poem.
Oh, I've got loads of. We can do that later.
Okay.
I'll do it later.
A little bit later.
Quite enjoying the conversation.
Could I ask you a question, Amoda Maa?
Sure.
So you're speaking about each partner speaking their truth about their feelings. If each person is fully taking responsibility for that, does there become less and less of a need to communicate? Does this kind of change over time, the not necessarily need to communicate, but the need to communicate I'm feeling this, and to actually fully take responsibility, and does that kind of just dissolve a little bit over time?
Yes, I think it does dissolve. Yeah. It's quite hard for me to speak from that, because when I entered relationship, it was the end of relationship for me. Do you mean it's like the need for a relationship had absolutely ended? So all these little dynamics that we're talking about are absolutely have not been alive in me for 20 years. So I'm in a different dimension, if you like. So it's quite hard for me to speak of, but I am aware of what the mechanisms are that play themselves out in the usual dynamic of relationship. I'll speak from this space, whether it's in relationship or not relationship, about feelings. When you live as openness, which is what awakening is, which is what enlightenment is. You've woken up out of the dream of the knot of separate self, of ego self, and fallen open. Yeah, that knot has fallen open. It has dissolved, so that the structures of self-identity are no longer there. And the main pin that holds it all together, of me as a separate entity, as in existence, that has also fallen open. From that, there's only the living as openness and as presence. That doesn't negate feelings. Everything is felt. There's an exquisite felt sense, because the human experience is one of sensing. As long as we've got a body, and that body is not limited to the physical body, it's also the energetic body and the inner body. As long as we have a body, then we experience life, the movement of life through that sensory organism. Yeah, on gross levels and on subtle levels. So the felt sense is always there, and it's exquisite, and it's exquisitely sensitive. That means we feel feelings. That's not the same as emotions, because feelings are in the present, emotions are a backlog of the past. So what I'm leading up to here is, in openness, and it's on a continuum, so there can be some openness and more and more and more openness. There is feeling, there is a felt sense, but it doesn't stick. It doesn't last long. So when we're talking about taking responsibility for that feeling, the responsibility for that feeling is the felt sense of it, which means there's no avoidance of it. There's no attempt to reject it. There's no attempt to avoid it. There's no attempt to transcend it. In other words, there's no bypassing of the felt sense in order not to feel it because you don't like it, or it's turbulent, or it's intense. Yeah, there's no avoidance of anything. When there's no avoidance, it just gets felt. That's your responsibility. The responsibility is the no avoidance of what is felt.
Yeah.
But it moves on. It moves through you very quickly. That, I think, comes back to your question. Yeah. Do we have to keep on saying, I feel this, I feel this, I feel this in relationship? No, because inevitably it'll move through you. However, in relationship that is not two opennesses meeting, two awakened, two enlightened, two silences meeting, when it's not that, inevitably there's a backlog to what you feel. It comes from your past. That's why it's a trigger. That's why it's re-triggered a wound, an old wound. So there's a backlog from the past, or there's a backlog from the past of this relationship because it wasn't felt or acknowledged or met 3 weeks ago or 3 years ago, and here it is again. So then it does have to be said. It does have to be expressed. It does have to be met. If it's a persistent knock from the inside, then yes, it does.
I'd like to add to that, because that's true. I've actually, I work one-to-one with people, and I've been working with someone for probably 2 years, nearly every week and she is utterly committed to her awakening journey, and her partner, who she loves, is not. He is not interested. He's got defensive strategies. He's got his wounds. She knows it. She's seen it. And she's committed to hers. Well, we've been through every nuance you can imagine. he's this, he's that, I need to leave. You know, just so many different variations. And we've come back all the time to her, to clearing the debris of old stuff, of clearing the wounds of what we call taking responsibility, of going in to see that she has the authority that she's given away in her life. Her authority was stolen from her somehow in her childhood. And actually, part of the reclaiming of authority is not to just spill it out as if you've done this and you've done that anymore, but actually to really, like you said, to really feel it, to really feel it. Now, some of that is backlog of seeing the old patterns, seeing how she ended up as the person that she is. And some of it is just the felt sense of what's actually happening this week or today in the relationship that feels problematic. And then it changes into something else the next week. That's not the problem at all. The relationship is not a problem. And what we've noticed is that the more work she's done on herself, even though he's not a spiritual guy and he's not interested in it, something is changing in him. He is softening because she is opening. He is softening because she's taking back her authority. She's not playing any of the games anymore. And I don't mean that in a hard way. I actually mean it in a good way, because she's realized it's all in herself. And to a certain extent, he can be like he wants. Well, without being ridiculous, we're not talking about abusive situations here. We're just talking about kind of semi-spiritual relationships or regular relationships. So she's realized that actually she's not going to give her authority away to him to decide how she should be. So within coming back to herself and realizing the isness of her own nature, coming back to the truth of her own nature as non-dual, as openness itself, he keeps relaxing more. Not in some spiritual way, just in an ordinary way. He's actually more content. Their communication level is improving. Not completely, not as fast as we want, you know, or she wants, but it's changing. And so, and of course, absolutely, as Amoda has said, you know, and sometimes she's had to show up and say, I feel this, or this is what's happening to me, or I'm not being met, you know, any of those things that we're talking about. And it is a mixture of the both things.
I think, you know, this thing about not being met, you know, if that's just on a very ground level, basic communication, if you're coming to your partner and saying, I'm not being met, that's a blame. That's putting the responsibility on you. You're not meeting me. There's a different way of saying that.
And that is?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know what's the feeling underneath it. That's a discovery. I feel.
Well, I mean, we're talking about, because to me, there is a need on the human level for us to be seen. That's not the same as I'm not being met. They're different things.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. But yes, just going, just sort of taking the leap of what you're saying, Kavi. It's like, it's, you know, love, when you have come to know your true nature as love, not as a loving person, yeah, because that's still a self-identity, that's still coming from the personhood, yeah. But when you know your true nature as openness, which is the same as love, openness is love. It's unconditional, it's undemanding, it's unrestrictive, it's not coming with expectation or agenda or control or need. When you know your true nature as that, which is what true fulfillment is, fulfillment not from the world of form, but the fulfillment of having come home to your true nature, then love doesn't need anybody, not even your intimate partner, not your mother, not your father, not your child, to be anything other than the way they are. in the moment, in the moment, in the moment. And in that, something relaxes. You relax. Well, you are relaxed because you are that openness, but the other relaxes. In your presence, they can relax and be themselves because there's no hidden demand on them. There's no hidden demand that you didn't meet me or you don't love me or you don't, yeah? And something relaxes. Everybody comes to their true nature. Now, of course, there are times where we have to say, hey, you know, I need, you know, I'd like you to listen to me, or I'd like to say something. You know, there are times when it's necessary, but primarily this thing of need, control, and the surrender of that can change everything.
See how we need to keep coming back when we, you know, this, because this is not a teaching in the sense that there's, you know, something specific to say that has an ABC structure. And there are teachers who do that, but this is not that. This is a living experience. And you can see how we have to dissect, we have to dive in because it's a living experience. This is our relationship right now. You, me, Sadie, we're having the relationship. So we're listening to each other. We're alive in the experience. This is it. This is the template that we're talking about, that we need to kind of, you know, adopt, because it's tricky when Amoda talks about the openness and meeting each other from silence. And that's the fundamental ground that we're talking about. But then we get into the sticky realm of human relationships and how to sort them out when one person is willing, the other person isn't willing. We've got some bags that we're still carrying from the past, which is what most people are still carrying. And it's sticky, it's tricky. What to say?
I was reading through your book, Amoda Maa, this morning, and it reminds me so much of, I mean, everything you're talking about. It was such a poignant piece in this chapter. And it was at the part where you said the invitation of this relationship then becomes one of sacrificing all expectation, agenda, strategy, and all cherished notions of conscious or spiritual relationship. If you really want to be conscious in relationship, the invitation is for you to stop being concerned with whether your partner is conscious or spiritual and take responsibility for your own state of consciousness.
That's right.
So,
yeah, that's right. We're so, yeah, that's again goes back to what I mean by the dream of relationship. We actually come with a huge expectation on relationship, and whether it's spiritual or not spiritual, or not a spirit, you know, a conventional relationship, it's the same myth, the same dream that we come with, the same expectation, you know, and perhaps when it's spiritual or conscious, the expectation is even higher. We want our partner to be a certain way. We want them to have the same ideals as us, to be like-minded, and so on and so on, and to surrender that, you know, because that's adding to the war, that's adding to the division, that's adding to the separation. That's huge. To come innocent and naked into relationship without expectation, then there's only love. And of course, if in that open love that has no agenda, you just don't get on, or you just don't like each other, or you just realize you don't want to live with each other, there's no purpose to it, well, that's fine. That's the end of it. That's the end of it. It's not the end of love. It's the end of that particular form of relationship. But we usually come with the expectation, with the agenda, and then try to keep the relationship in that form fighting for it, trying to fix it, trying to control it, trying to hold on to it, trying not to lose it. And all the time, it's a subtle battle. It's a war that's going on. Well, find out if love really wants to grow through this form of relationship. If love really wants to grow through that form, then find out by letting go of all agenda and see what remains. Because if it's meant to flower in that way, then it will. And if it's not, there'll be a parting of the ways. I know that sounds ruthless and radical, but that's the true nature of love. Yeah.
I would like to add something to that as well. And that is one of the things that I learned directly in this relationship through Amoda, was that I thought that I was having a relationship with Amoda, and then it dawned on me, slowly or rapidly, that that's not true. I'm having a relationship with existence, and Amoda is one of the people and forms that appears within my own consciousness, within my relationship with God, or my relationship with the divine, whatever you want to call it. And when I realized that she was a player, but she wasn't the source of anything that I was going to, that was on offer, that I imagined, then there was a great relief in that, because she could be a player that stays as long as I'm alive, or as long as she's alive, or as long as it exists, or as long as we're in a state of openness and contentment. And I can't imagine it happening, but you never know what's going to happen. We live in the unknown. And we've faced this possibility that, it's unlikely that we're going to split up in the near future, but who knows? And also to be able to face the fact that I was born into this existence alone, and out of this existence, I will disappear alone. Meanwhile, there are people and things that come and go, but they are coming and going things. This is exactly relevant to what you've been saying, Amoda, that it's my aloneness that I need to come to terms with, not the relationship. The relationship is a part of that experience, but to hang everything of my nature, everything of my awakening on that relationship is to create an addictive mechanism or a dependency, hence codependency, on that relationship. We have consciously, completely opened into ourselves and each other, knowing that at some point in this life, she or I will leave each other and break each other's heart. Wide open.
Because one of us will die.
Because one of us will die.
Unless
we're both taken together, one of us is going to leave the other one. And we've talked about it, and we've willingly decided that love is much more important than any of that, than existence, than coming or going. Because it doesn't make any difference. I'm here anyway, on my own, alone. And there she is, this divine creature that showed up in my life to reflect that truth back to me. And that needs to be seen, that every single person who's listening to this, who's watching it, you're as alone as I am, as she is. It's a beautiful thing, and it's a terrifying thing, but it's a true thing. And the person that you're with, or the person that's tormenting you, or the person that you want to leave, or who doesn't understand you, they're a player. They're not the main act. Existence is the main act. It's exquisite, it's agony, and it's exquisite. That's what I mean about the poetry of life. If we can bring some of that poetry to it, some of that beauty, some of that depth, some of the grief of our existence, then we start to get a much deeper kind of context for the whole thing, rather than being stuck on the level of self, which can't sort anything out. It's not to sort anything out. Nobody out there is going to sort anything out with the self. It's going to have endless chain of stuff that goes on. But only by getting deeper down to realize that we're alone. And then I, as my aloneness, can relate to Amoda as her aloneness. Not in any pious, ridiculous way, but just as the truth that underpins this entire relationship.
Beautiful. So we have around 20 minutes left, and Kavi would love to hear your poem. And we also have a couple of questions. So I'm not sure which one you'd like to do first. You got the poem ready? Otherwise, we can just dive right into the questions.
I'm going to read, I'll read this, I don't even know what it says. Enlightened relationship, a journey, not a destination. There is no how-to here. We are not prescribing a method. What is being offered is a possibility of relating on a whole different level permanently, not just with your lover, husband, wife, or partner, but with everyone, with the world itself. This is not just about relationship, but about awakening from the imagination of the false self and the baggage that accompanies that imagination. The relationship part, like the awakening part, is a mystery, a door that each of us must open. Each key is different, each mirror different, everyone unique, but with the same themes and metaphors, the same hurdles and apparent obstacles. We are here to point to that possibility. Relationship is the bedrock of our humanity. And if we can transform relationship, and that means relationship to everything, then everything about how we all live changes. But it's a tricky and sticky path filled with ghosts and shadows, old habits and learned behaviors. There are walls that must be taken down, oceans that must be crossed. Much of what we have already learned through our conditioning will become fuel for the fire of transformation, and we must become friends with the unknown. For many, the casing around the heart will be an obstacle. That too must go. Everything must go. Awakening from the dream of separation is the same as living as openness in relationship. They are synonymous and go hand in hand. We are here to fuel the fire of your transformation. This is, above all, an invitation to open your mind, to open your heart a little bit wider, and to fall into or rise into greater possibilities. Yes, we may have to go through the clouds or fall into the ocean, but when we do, what is revealed is beautiful and natural and whole.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if we've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, okay. So one question here from Alexandra says, what can I do if my partner's issues are too hard for me to face? States of fear, pains in chest, paralyzed. I reject him because I can't stand these states. Also, he says they're only physical states, as they're leftovers from Lyme disease, and I believe problems in the body always reflect problems in the emotions.
Well, the invitation is well, the question, yeah, the question is, would you reject those states, those energies in yourself? If it was you, so yeah, speaking to the questioner, if it was you that had those sensations, those symptoms, those energetic states, those emotional states, those physical states, would you reject those because they were too unbearable in yourself? And how can that be? Because when you start fighting with your own experience, You are in such a state of inner division. The torment, the war is in you. The battle is in you. It's no different when you reject those states in another because you can't handle them, because you can't bear them, because they're just not what you want. You have a different agenda. Yeah. The battle is in you. So this goes back to taking responsibility for your state of consciousness. Your state of consciousness is one of division, is one of war, is one of arguing with reality. The reality is, this is what's here in your experience. The utmost tenderness towards that is what is being called for. And if you can't handle it and don't want to handle it, you genuinely don't want to, then walk away. Then walk away. Your responsibility is to your inner state of consciousness, not as a way of protecting yourself from other people's pain or other people's suffering, but for finding true peace. If you can be at peace by coming to the utmost openness in yourself, where there's no more argument with reality, then find out if you need to walk away or if you can stay. Because that's what it takes. Whether it's a child, whether it's a lover, or whether it's an aging parent, or whether it's your pet.
See, there's, I'd like to just add to that something that in a lot of relationships, it's easy for triggers to start ping-ponging. Yeah, the ping-ponging of triggers, so that what he's going through, or what he denies, or what he won't open to, then triggers you to then go into your own stuff. And then what you go, he can't face what you're going through, so you have to either hide it or else you hand it back to him and he feels that. So you go into this endless ping-ponging of triggers where you end up somewhere nobody can remember what the original brief was. So at some point that has to be, if there's a desire for growth on one or the other party, but sounds like to her, is it has to, like Amoda said, it has to come down to you. You have to decide and see within yourself what's being triggered, what's being avoided. Where's the wall within yourself? Why is it so difficult to reject? I mean, why do you reject what he's going through? So it's tender, painful.
We have another question. We were speaking about one of you leaving through death, and the question is, are you saying existence ends with death?
Sorry, what did you, could you repeat that? I didn't hear it.
Yeah. Okay. So this question was written into the comment section back when you guys were talking about one of you leaving the other through death. And
Yes.
the question was simply, are you saying existence ends with death?
Well, this existence.
This existence does.
The only existence that you can know is the one through your I consciousness, through the one who experiences. When the one who experiences this experience is no longer here, then this experience, this existence ends. We're not talking about existence as something outside of ourselves, some independent entity that's going on whilst I'm here as the observer, the witness, the experiencer. Yeah, the experiencer is inside existence, or existence is inside the experiencer. Yeah? Once the experiencer is no longer here, then this existence no longer exists. That's all we can know.
It's a very much more Zen approach to life that we're talking about than having ideas or theories, which are all very valid, about the nature of existence. What we're talking about, as Amoda said, is just the very bare bones of our existence. This existence, the human realm, this one. That's all. The simplicity of I, Kavi, as this form, have opened, you know, and within that I encounter Amoda in this form, in this reality, who has also opened. We love without boundaries. We relate without boundaries. There's no agenda, there's no stuff, there's only the functional self, in a sense, that meets each other, because that's how we meet on this level of reality. And what we're saying is at some point, this form, that Amoda form, or this form, Kavi form, is going to dissolve. Where they go is a different question. What happens
Well, the
afterwards?
direct reality, we're talking about direct reality, yeah, not theoretical reality.
Yes, that's right.
But
Yeah.
direct reality is the only true reality. Yeah, this is what awakening is. Awakening isn't awakening into a cosmic dimension, or fifth dimension, or whatever dimension. Yeah, that's not to negate the possibility of dimensions, but awakening is the direct experience of reality, and that can only be known through the eye that experiences it. That is consciousness. Consciousness does not exist as an independent factor outside of you. It's in you, as you, and you are in it as it. Yeah, so it's both.
Thank you. There's a few people on the comments who are asking about you and Kavi when you first got together. And I know we spoke quite a bit about this earlier, but there seems to be an abundance of questions about that. So one of the questions was, when you and Kavi came together, was it a meeting in openness? No trying to smooth or...
Absolutely.
No.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When we came together, I had ended relationship. The concept of relationship was over for me. Not because I'm an independent feminist or anything like that, or totally happy with my own social life. Nothing like that. I had come to a deep existential abyss of aloneness. And through falling into that, I won't go into the whole story. It's in my books and I've spoken about it, and so on and so on. But that was the final unraveling of the knot of self-identity. And in that, I merged with the totality of life. My only way of expressing it at the time was that I had married God. I was one with God, not God as some entity or cosmic power, but the totality of existence as consciousness itself. And in that, there's no more separation. There's no more need. There's no more seeking mechanism. There's still a human being, but there was no seeking relationship. Kavi appeared in my life because we were working together, and so on and so on. And something emerged out of that, which had no need in it, and yet was love. It had tenderness towards this other form, but that's all there was anyway. Was this, that there was no more argument with reality in me.
So I can speak to that as well, because
Yeah.
you know, that's very true, and that's why we don't talk about fixing or a particular method for how a relationship works, because it's very nuanced. This is about Amoda and I. Well, who are we? We're just two individuals incarnated in this experience. So it's going to be different for everybody. When I met Amoda, I'd crashed out of a previous relationship because I realized that the vibration of it and the lies that I was carrying in it were just untenable. And then this over a period of time, this thing started to happen with Amoda, and it turned me into Rumi. It turned me into Rumi. Well, I didn't expect that was going to happen. I had no idea. So then I just wrote poetry. I sang songs. I courted her in the sense of courting her as a divine being. And there was no old stuff. I had to meet myself more than she did. I had to meet myself because I was carrying some old stuff into the relationship. Not a lot, but enough that I had to make some decisions and I had to meet myself. So it was very real. It's very real for me, but there wasn't the meeting in two selves that then go on a long journey and then start to have to unravel it. That didn't That didn't happen in our relationship. There was me over a long period of time, which happened for all different reasons. It's like I got really ill. So then I had to unravel my whole human experience, my emotional, mental experience as well, as that related to health. But all of this was not a problem because I'd fallen into the arms of Shams of Tabriz, which was Amoda Maa, you know, as she turned up in my life. So it was poetic and beautiful,
Yes.
wasn't it?
Yes. And from my point of view, there was no need for him to be anything other than how he was.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no sense of control or expectation or demand for love or anything. And that's not how it was in previous relationships for me. Not at all. I've been in very turbulent emotional relationships where the need to be loved was so you know, overpowering in me that I played all sorts of games of being the submissive one or being the rejected one and so on and so on. So I have experience of that too, but something fundamentally changed. And whether human relationship happened or not in this lifetime was completely irrelevant. The fact that it did reveal itself is a beautiful thing that has given birth to something, to a joy, to a living joy on the human realm, and in terms of the purpose of the relationship, which perhaps we can talk about how
Next week, yeah.
that relates to the world next week. But that was the ground of our relationship. It wasn't about working things out. It was about what the deeper purpose of relationship is, the flowering of love in the world. So in that sense, it's quite rare. I speak about it in my book. I do say that this kind of relationship is actually quite rare because it's not the usual paradigm of the world, but it is beginning to break through, and it's rare, but it's not out of reach. So everyone's on the journey on some place on the continuum, and we can certainly deepen our own journey of coming home to ourselves,
Yeah.
as presence, as openness, within the mess of intimate relationship and within the mess of life itself, which is all relationship anyway. So it's not something out of reach, but it is in flowering in this quite spontaneous way. It is quite unusual.
And I would just add one thing to that as closing, because I'm realizing that we're closing here, is that what I realized was that awakening comes first.
Yes.
Awakening comes first. If there's anything to devote yourself to, it's actually awakening. Because without the awakening, there can be no real relating. It can't happen. That's not to say you have to reject the relationship, but the primary fire is the fire of awakening, period.
Coming to know your true nature.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Thank you both so much.
We will expand on this next week with, you know, hopefully pointing to the higher purpose or the deeper purpose of relationship, because there's more. You know, relationship is not just problem solving or meeting problems. That's a big part of it, but there's another purpose that almost has a more mystical, but certainly has a very beautiful and powerful quality and component to it that we do want to talk about. And there's one more thing that I'd like to say, and that is to invite anybody who listens to join my Facebook poetry page, which I'll have to give you a link for or something like that, because I think you might not have it. Kavi Poetry, I think it's called, or Kavi Poet and Musician.
She does have it. I gave it.
She does. Oh, good. Yeah. Come and join me. You'll love my poetry. It's crazy, and there's some good deep stuff in there, and I'll interact with you. And I would love to have people come and join my poetry, because I've been putting it into the ether for so long now that it's about time some people read it and heard it.
Okay.
Thank you both so much. And we're meeting again on May 15th.
All right.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
See you then.
Thank you. Namaste.